My name is Nancy Harper, and I live in the quiet suburb of Evergreen Heights, just outside Seattle, Washington. It's the kind of place where the evergreens loom like silent guardians over manicured lawns, and everyone knows your business but pretends they don't. Our house on Maplewood Lane was supposed to be our forever home, a two-story craftsman with a wraparound porch where I'd envisioned raising kids, hosting barbecues, and growing old with the man I thought was my rock. That man was Daniel Harper, my husband of 8 years. We met at the University of Washington, back when he was studying finance and I was chasing a degree in literature, dreaming of writing novels that captured the raw ache of the human heart. He was charismatic, with that easy Seattle smile and a laugh that could disarm anyone. I fell hard, convinced we'd built something unbreakable. But cracks had been forming for months, maybe years. Daniel's job at the downtown brokerage firm swallowed him whole, late nights turning into all-nighters, weekends lost to client dinners. I'd wait up with a glass of Pinot Noir from the Columbia Valley, flipping through pages of Jane Austen, wondering if our story had lost its plot. He'd come home smelling of scotch and excuses, brushing off my questions with a tired wave. "It's just work, Nan. You wouldn't understand." I tried to bridge the gap, suggesting couples counseling at the community center in Ballard, planning spontaneous drives to the Olympic Peninsula for hikes that cleared the mind. But he shut down every overture, his eyes glazing over like the fog rolling in from Puget Sound. It all boiled over one rainy Tuesday evening in late autumn, the kind of day where the sky hangs low and heavy, mirroring the weight in your chest. I'd taken the afternoon off from my editing job at the local indie press in Fremont to surprise him with dinner, salmon from Pike Place Market, grilled with lemon and herbs, his favorite. The table was set with our wedding china, candles flickering against the chill seeping through the windows. He stumbled in at 9, tie loosened, shirt untucked, and I could see the storm in his eyes before he even spoke. "Daniel, sit. We need to talk," I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. I poured him a glass of water, not wine. I wanted clarity, not escape. He dropped into the chair, rubbing his temples. "Nan, not tonight. I'm exhausted. This isn't about tonight. It's about us, every night. You're drifting, and I'm drowning trying to hold on." The words tumbled out, laced with the hurt I'd bottled up. I told him how lonely I felt, how his absences carved hollows in me that no amount of freelance manuscripts could fill. How I needed more than perfunctory kisses and half-hearted, "I love you," texted from across the city. I needed him. His presence, his partnership, the emotional tether that had drawn us together in the first place. He stared at the salmon, untouched, then met my gaze with something cold and unfamiliar. "Nancy, grow up. Marriage isn't some fairy tale from your books. Provide. I show up when it counts. What more do you want? Satisfaction. Emotional fulfillment every damn day." His voice rose, sharp as the rain lashing the panes. "I don't owe you satisfaction. Life's not fair. Deal with it." The words landed like a slap, echoing in the silence that followed. "I don't owe you satisfaction." It wasn't just dismissal. It was a declaration of war on our vows. The man who'd once whispered sonnets in my ear during late-night study sessions now reduced our bond to a transaction. I sat there, numb, as he pushed back from the table and retreated to his study, the door clicking shut like a final punctuation. That night I didn't sleep. I lay in our king-sized bed, the sheets cold where he should have been, replaying his words until they etched into my soul. By morning, he'd left for work without a goodbye, and I wandered the house like a ghost, touching the framed photos from our wedding in Discovery Park, smiling faces that now mocked me. Evergreen Heights felt smaller, suffocating. That's when I noticed the moving truck across the street. Our neighbor, Lucas Kane, had been a fixture on Maplewood Lane for years, a widower in his early 40s, with salt and pepper hair and eyes the color of Lake Washington on a stormy day. He ran a small consulting firm from his home office, something vague about cybersecurity for local startups. We'd exchanged pleasantries over fences, him complimenting my rose garden, me asking about his golden retriever, Scout, who loved chasing squirrels in the nearby Ravenna Park. He was polite, reserved, the kind of man who fixed your leaky gutter without asking for thanks. But since his wife, Sarah, passed from cancer 2 years prior, he'd retreated further, his porch light often burning late into the night. The truck was unloading boxes into the guest house behind his property, a charming carriage house we'd all envied at neighborhood block parties. I watched from my kitchen window, coffee cooling in my mug, when Lucas emerged, directing the movers with quiet authority. Our eyes met across the rain-slicked lawn, and he waved, a tentative smile breaking through. On impulse, I grabbed my umbrella and crossed the street, the mud sucking at my boots. "Morning, Nancy," he called, wiping sweat from his brow. "Come to inspect the chaos." I forced a laugh, the first genuine one since Daniel's words. "Something like that. New tenant?" He nodded, stacking a box labeled books. "My cousin Theo, from back east Portland actually, needs a place while he sorts some family matters." There was a hesitation in his voice, a shadow that flickered and vanished. "Want to meet him later? I'm firing up the grill tomorrow. Nothing fancy, just burgers." I hesitated, glancing back at my empty house. Why not? Daniel owed me nothing, apparently. Maybe I didn't owe him my isolation. Sure. Sounds good. That barbecue marked the beginning, not of some tawdry entanglement, but of a quiet unraveling, a psychological tether that would pull us all into depths we couldn't foresee. Theo Whitaker arrived that afternoon, a lanky man in his late 30s with a Portland artist's vibe, tattoos peeking from his flannel sleeves, a messenger bag slung over one shoulder stuffed with sketchpads. He was Lucas's cousin on his mother's side, hailing from the rainy streets of southeast Portland, where he'd scraped by as a graphic designer until a bitter divorce upended his life. "Fresh start," he said with a wry grin, shaking my hand. "Evergreen Heights seems like a good spot to hide from one's mistakes." We ate on Lucas's back deck, the scent of cedar smoke mingling with the evergreens. Scout begged for scraps under the table, and conversation flowed easier than I'd expected. Daniel was at another meeting, so I stayed longer than planned, nursing a local IPA from Fremont Brewing. Theo sketched idly on a napkin, a whimsical rendering of Scout mid-leap, while Lucas shared stories of Sarah, his voice softening with memories of their hikes in the Cascades. There was a vulnerability there, a shared language of loss that resonated with my own quiet grief over the marriage I'd mourned before it was truly dead. As the sun dipped behind the Olympics, casting golden hues over the yard, Theo leaned in. "You look like someone carrying a story, Nancy. The kind that needs telling." His eyes held mine, not with flirtation, but with an intensity that pierced the armor I'd worn since Daniel's outburst. It wasn't attraction, it was recognition, a mirror reflecting the fractures within. Over the next weeks, what began as neighborly chats evolved into something deeper, more insidious. A psychological affair born of confession and complicity. It started innocently enough, Theo borrowing my ladder to hang string lights on the carriage house, me offering coffee in return. We'd sit on his tiny porch, the string lights twinkling like misplaced stars, and talk. Not small talk, but the raw underbelly of souls. He confessed the guilt of his failed marriage, how he'd buried himself in freelance gigs to avoid his ex-wife's pleas, how her final email, "You never truly saw me," haunted him like a ghost in the Willamette fog. I shared Daniel's words, the way they replayed in my dreams, eroding my sense of self. "He made me feel like a burden," I whispered one evening, the chill air nipping at my skin. Like my needs were a debt he never signed up for. Theo listened, truly listened. His sketches capturing fragments of our words, abstract swirls of blue for my loneliness, jagged lines for his regret. "Commitment isn't a ledger, Nan," he said softly. "It's a choice renewed every day. But when it stops, that's when you owe yourself the truth." His words were balm, but also a hook, drawing me into late-night texts about philosophy, Nietzsche on self-overcoming, sent from his battered iPhone, and shared playlists of indie folk from Seattle's coffeehouse scene. We never touched beyond a reassuring hand on the shoulder, But the intimacy was profound, a mental merging that filled the voids Daniel had hollowed out. Lucas noticed, of course. He'd join us sporadically, his cybersecurity work pulling him into encrypted calls with clients in Silicon Valley. But there was a tension in him, a watchful quality that I dismissed as protectiveness for his cousin. "Theo's got a way of getting under your skin," he joked once, pouring more coffee. "Like a virus you can't quite quarantine." I laughed it off, but the seed of unease took root. Suspense crept in subtly, like the tide pooling at Alki Beach. One crisp October morning, as I edited a manuscript on my laptop in the kitchen, Theo knocked, his face ashen. "Nan, can we talk?" "Privately." We retreated to the carriage house, where he paced the cluttered space, easels and half-finished canvases everywhere. "I think Lucas is in trouble. Deep trouble." He'd overheard a late-night argument between Lucas and an unknown caller, voices muffled through the thin walls. Words like offshore accounts, encrypted transfers, and the Seattle drop floated through, laced with threats. Theo, with his designer's eye for patterns, had pieced together clues. Lucas's sudden windfall last year, the unexplained trips to Vancouver, the locked safe in his office. "Sarah's medical bills were brutal," Theo explained, his voice low. "He sold their cabin in the San Juans to cover them, but that wasn't enough. What if he's laundering for those tech bros he consults with?" My heart raced, a cocktail of fear and thrill surging through me. Crime in Evergreen Heights. It was absurd, like finding a wolf in a picket fence pack. But Theo's sketches now included diagrams, flowcharts of suspicious bank wires he'd glimpsed on Lucas's desk, timelines of his cousin's absences. We became co-conspirators, our emotional bond twisting into a web of suspense. I'd slip over under the guise of borrowing sugar, rifling through recycling bins for discarded printouts while Theo distracted Lucas with board games in the main house. The psychological pull intensified. Every shared glance carried the weight of secrets, every whispered theory a thread binding us closer. Daniel's neglect faded into irrelevance. I was alive in this dance of deduction, my mind sharp, my empathy for Theo a lifeline in the storm. Yet guilt gnawed at me. Was this revenge? Proving to Daniel, and perhaps to myself, that I didn't owe him my fidelity of spirit. Our marriage teetered, conversations reduced to logistics. Bills, groceries from the QFC in Green Lake. He noticed my distraction, snapping one night over dinner. "Who's got you smiling at your phone like a schoolgirl?" "That artist Drifter." I deflected, but the accusation hung, festering. The turning point came during a fierce windstorm that knocked out power across the neighborhood. Evergreen Heights plunged into darkness, emergency lights from the fire station in Wedgwood casting eerie glows. Daniel was in Portland for a conference. Ironic, given Theo's origins, and I found myself at the carriage house, candles flickering as we huddled with mugs of chamomile tea. Scout snored by the heater, oblivious. Theo unrolled a canvas he'd been hiding. A portrait of me, not as I was, but as he saw me. Eyes fierce with unspoken fire, background a stormy Puget Sound. "This is the woman Daniel's too blind to see," he murmured. "The one who deserves commitment, not scraps." In that moment, the psychological affair crested, not in passion, but in a profound, aching vulnerability. I saw in Theo the mirror of my own fractures, and he in me a redemption he craved. We talked until dawn, unraveling childhood wounds. My parents' quiet divorce in Spokane. His father's abandonment in Portland's underbelly. It was cathartic, terrifying, a mental surrender that left me exposed, yet whole. But suspense shattered the intimacy like glass. As the power hummed back to life, Lucas burst in, drenched from the rain, eyes wild. "Theo! Nancy! Get inside now." He herded us to the main house, bolting the door. Through the window, headlights pierced the gloom. Two black sedans idling at the curb, men in dark coats scanning the street. "They found me," Lucas gasped, collapsing onto the sofa. The story poured out in frantic bursts. He'd been coerced into money laundering for a ring of corrupt tech executives in Bellevue, funneling embezzled funds through his cybersecurity firm. Sarah's bills had been the hook. Refusal meant exposure of fabricated evidence pinning him for fraud. The Seattle drop was tonight. A handoff at the waterfront piers, derailed by the storm. Crime collided with our fragile world. Theo's theories weren't paranoia. They were prescient. We barricaded ourselves, hearts pounding, as Lucas clutched a burner phone, whispering coordinates to an old contact in the FBI's Seattle field office. The psychological toll mounted. Lucas confessed his isolation, how grief had blinded him to the moral slide, mirroring Daniel's emotional detachment in a twisted parallel. "I thought I was protecting what was left of us," he said, tears carving tracks down his face. "But I owed Sarah better. Owed you both better." I thought of Daniel's words then, a bitter echo. If he didn't owe me satisfaction, did I owe him the truth of this night? The sedans lingered for an hour, engines idling like predators, before peeling away into the storm. Sirens wailed distantly. King County deputies converging. By morning, federal agents swarmed Maplewood Lane, cuffing a bleary-eyed Lucas as neighbors gawked from porches. Theo and I stood side by side, his hand brushing mine in silent solidarity, as the carriage house was taped off as a crime scene. The aftermath was a whirlwind of statements at the precinct in Northgate. Headlines in the Seattle Times branding Lucas, the evergreen embezzler. He faced charges, wire fraud, conspiracy, but cut a deal, testifying against the ring in exchange for leniency. Theo returned to Portland, his fresh start tainted, but not before leaving me the portrait. A reminder, you owe yourself everything. Our texts tapered, the bond fracturing under the weight of reality, a psychological scar that healed unevenly. Daniel came home to the chaos, piecing together my involvement from news clips and my haunted expression. We sat on our porch that final night, the roses wilted from neglect. "What the hell happened, Nan? While I was gone?" His voice cracked, not with anger but fear, the first real emotion in months. I met his gaze steady. "You said you didn't owe me satisfaction. So I found it elsewhere, not in betrayal but in seeing myself clearly. With Theo, with Lucas's mess. I proved I don't owe you my commitment blindly. Not anymore." He reached for my hand but I pulled away. Divorce papers followed, amicable in the Seattle way. Assets split, no kids to complicate the grief. I moved to a cozy apartment in Capitol Hill, closer to the press, where the hum of city life drowned out echoes of Maplewood Lane. I started writing again, not novels, but a memoir of that winter. The affair of minds that unearthed crime and cracked open hearts. Looking back, it wasn't revenge, it was reckoning. In the damp embrace of the Pacific Northwest, where secrets fester like moss on cedars, I learned that true suspense lies not in shadows lurking outside, but in the ones we cast within. And emotional debts. They're the ones we pay to ourselves, one honest choice at a time.